Another author that I stumbled across last year is Julie Clark, and she wrote. Hi everybody, my name is Kelsey, and we're about to get very, very nerdy with authors that I discovered last year. So what I mean by this is authors that like could have been well pre-established obviously at this point, but they were new to me and I discovered them last year and really honestly have fallen in love with them. So I have a list of 10 authors to talk about, and I'll try to leave at least one book per author instead of like all the things that I've read by this author down below if you'd like to check them out. But these are just some of the ones that I personally have just really fallen in love with and wanted to talk about. So this list is in literally no particular order except for the fact that this is how I thought about them. So the first one is the one that kind of kicked off this idea, and that is Jean Meltzer. So Jean Meltzer wrote The Matzo Ball, which I read at the end of last year. It was my Hanukkah romance, and I just fell head over heels. And I have since started reading Mr. Perfect on paper. I haven't quite finished it yet, but I have started it. And she is just a fantastic author that writes these like swoony Hallmark style in like book form. So you have all like those rom-com vibes, but there's so much substance to them because Jean Meltzer herself is Jewish. So the main character in these books, at least from these two, and I think her new upcoming one, are all Jewish. And there is some sort of representation within them. The author, Jean Meltzer, she suffers from chronic fatigue syndrome. And so the main character in The Matzo Ball suffers from that. And then the main character in this one suffers from severe generalized anxiety. So there's always something that's represented. So you know that you're going to get a book that has all of the fun romance, like fuzzy vibes that you're going to get from something that's just for fun, but it's going to have a lot of substance to it as well. So I've just fallen head over heels in love with her, and she's kind of, I just wanted to talk about her a little bit more. So she's the reason I started this list, because she is like #1 author that I discovered last year that has rolled into this year, and I've just fallen head over heels in love with. So yeah, the next author that I want to talk about is Michelle McLean. She wrote the Gunslinger series, which is Hitched to a Gunslinger, and then The Gunslinger's Guide to Avoiding Matrimony. I read these two with my friend Taylor, and we fell head over heels in love with this author, and I now want to read everything that she has written. We have read one other thing by this author that was just kind of okay, but this author is one that I want to keep reading things because these two were just so good, and she is probably the best writer, in my opinion, when it comes to banter between main characters. So if that's like your thing, that kind of like back and forth argumentative style, almost hate to love vibes, then she's definitely going to be an author for you. And like, she is, again, one of the best writers when it comes to banter. So I love that. That's one of the reasons I love her, but she's able to write these beautiful romances as well. And she's one that I just randomly stumbled across last year because we liked the cover of this one. That's how we found her. And she's just so good. Another author that I stumbled across last year and have kind of dived a little bit into her work is Julie Clark. So I read The Lies I Tell, which was a book of the month book I just randomly picked up. It is a domestic thriller, and I really enjoyed it. And so I've recently picked up, as you would have seen in my haul, The Last Flight by her. I believe this one came out first, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But she just has this beautiful way of writing women. So like both of these books follow two women specifically. Now, The Lies I Tell, like I said, I read it last year. And this one follows, yeah, this is her most recent one. This one came before. And so The Lies I Tell follows a con artist, and she basically is just conning bad men and trying to make life for certain women, or just people in general, better. And then this one follows two women. I haven't read this one yet, but this one follows two women who basically are trying to escape their lives, and they meet at an airport and end up taking each other's flight and kind of becoming the other person. And then one of the women, that flight goes down, and so the other one ends up having to like be her, and some secrets come out. But she has this very amazing way of writing a thriller that's made me very interested, and other things by her At this point, I feel like these are the only two that are out right now. I might have made that up, but I feel like there's only two out right now. And I could see myself getting very heavily invested in other books by her. Clearly, I bought another one. But her books all just sound really, really interesting. And again, I loved this. I didn't know what to expect going in. I'm very iffy when it comes to thrillers. I like them. I like them in theory, but when I read them, they become less fun somehow. So I wasn't so sure about this one, but it became amazing. And so I have high hopes for the other one. But yeah, she is another one that I kind of stumbled upon this past year. Another one is Juno Dawson, who wrote Her Majesty's Royal Coven. It came out last year, and it's the first in a trilogy, so the second one is going to be coming out later this year. I will not shut up about this book because it was definitely one of my favorites last year. She has this beautiful way of meshing important political conversations because Juno Dawson is trans herself, and it also has a lot of conversation within this book about trans rights and the whole like feminism versus trans women kind of issue. So you've got that you know, issue that's talked a lot about, but she meshes it so well with the plot so that it doesn't take away from the plot. The plot is still very, very heavily a huge part of the story. I guess what I'm trying to say is that she does really good at meshing important conversations with the plot, and she does it in a way that neither of those things are lacking. So you're not sitting there going, okay, we get it, we understand your point, what does this mean for the plot? And you're also not going, okay, I get it, this is the plot, why did you just mention that for 5 seconds? Like, this conversation is integral to the plot, and they just go very well hand in hand together. So I've loved this book, and it's definitely an author that I'm going to keep my eyes out for because, like, honestly, fantastic start, and I expect great things. So the next author is Victoria Aveline, and this is the author who wrote Choosing Theo. So this is a book that I read in October when I was doing my kind of like monster vlog series, monster romance vlog, and this one is an alien romance, and I head over heels fell in love with this character, this story. I'm obsessed, and I want to continue with this series. I know that there's at least, I think, 6 in this series total, and I'm sure that she's done other things, I just don't know about it, but this series kind of took me heart and soul, and I didn't really expect it. It's one of those authors that, like, I've heard nothing about except for my friend Taylor, who stumbled across this, and she's the one who told me to read this book, and I'm so glad I did, because seriously, she's an amazing author, and the fact that no one's really talking about her, or at least in the circles that I'm in, I've heard like no one talking about her, and I think that she needs to be talked about more. She's up there with, like, you know, like that, the blue, I can't ever remember, Ice Planet Barbarians. That series is like super popular, and like everyone seems to love that. I feel like they would appreciate this book, because in my opinion, this one's better than Ice Planet Barbarians, and so I feel like those kinds of people who would like that kind of book would enjoy this one as well, maybe even more. And so everyone just seems to be sleeping on her, and I think she's amazing. So I highly recommend her if I haven't talked about her enough, but she's one that, like, I didn't know what to expect going in, and it was amazing. I loved every second of it. She was just an author that took my breath away and wrote an incredibly amazing romance with all of the like fun smutty scenes and the fun romantic elements that you expect, with really important world building and character building with it as well. So she didn't lack in anything, in my opinion. So yeah, she's one that if you haven't heard of her, you really need to investigate her because she's amazing. So of course I couldn't make this list without talking about Beth O'Leary, and the book that I started out reading is actually The No-Show, and I still don't have my copy quite yet. It's making its way back to me, but that's fine. As long as people are loving it, that's what matters. And because of that, I picked up The Road Trip and The Switch, and I don't even know how to express to you how much The No-Show kind of like adjusted my reading last year. It was a book that I went into not really sure what to expect, but there was something about it that made it interesting, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it because that book presents itself to be about cheating, which is a thing that I think a lot of us don't like to read about, and so I went in really hesitantly because of that, but I'd heard good things about this author, and she's definitely one of those authors that is really good at pairing like important conversations with a romantic story, but she also does it in a way that takes your breath away. Like, I was second guessing every second of The No-Show. There's quite a few kind of twists and turns and plot reveals near the end of the book, and each one that came was like you know, now that you see it, you're like, oh, I see all the little like pieces that you had leading up to it, but I didn't pick up on any of them. And also, like, that's just me. I'm really bad at picking up on things. But like, she had this well-crafted story, and at the same time, like, you go into it, and by the end, you are in love with every single character in there, even if you feel like you shouldn't like them. So she has an amazing way of gripping you and making you care about the character, and because of that, I want to read all of her things, which is why I've collected 2 other things by her and haven't read them yet, because I just, like, I feel like she's going to be amazing, because like the one thing that I read was fantastic, and I even heard that people like other things by her more than that, so I was like, what does that mean? I feel like it just can't get any worse. So I'm showing 2 that I haven't read yet, but she's an author that, like, I've known about for a hot second, but I didn't really start reading until last year, and oh my goodness, I am so glad that I did. The next author is Olivia Atwater, and she wrote Half a Soul, and this is a book that one of you lovely individuals put on my radar as kind of like a Pride and Prejudice meets like fairy, so it's like a historical yet also fantasy romance, and that's exactly what it is. It has all of the everything in it is amazing, and there is a couple more books in this series as well. It's got the amazing like Regency romance vibes, Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen vibes that you want in a book, but it also has like fantasy in it. Like the fact that there are fae and fantastical elements and like your everyday life is not even questioned. But then you still have all the like the propriety that you would expect from a Regency or Victorian romance. And I just really enjoyed the way that she crafted the story, the way that I'm reading it, and it felt like a story that you would read. It felt like it was written similar to the time of Jane Austen, so it had that like older classic vibe to it without being too classic where you don't understand what's going on. And I think she did a very good job of doing that, but also like really making you appreciate the characters, connect the characters, make this world that is semi-based in reality and semi-not based in reality feel very, very realistic. And it's so easy to take, you know, our world, add a couple of things, and all of a sudden it's no longer realistic and you couldn't believe. You sometimes you have to suspend your disbelief when you go into stories, and she made it make sense, and she made it not feel like that. It felt like I honestly could believe that there was a time where fantasy and fantastical elements existed in our history. So I don't know, it was just really good, and I'm definitely going to be trying other things out by this author. So thank you so much to the lovely individual who put this on my radar, because like I adored it. It was definitely, I think it was in my list of favorites last year. Like it was so good, and now I'm gonna have my eyes on her for a while. The next one is an author that I read a series of novellas from, and that is Nichola Davidson, and she wrote, I can't remember what they're called, but it was like this series of novellas that was like Sin, Vice, and something else. Oh, I'm so good. I can like see the covers, but it was a series of smutty novellas, and they all took place at this like, I don't even know what you would call it, but like this secret club that is more of like, I wouldn't call it like a sex club, because like that's not what it is, but it has those vibes to it, and it follows the 3 guys who run that, and each novella follows an individual person. Devil, that was the other one. So Sin, Devil, and Vice. Ooh, I got there eventually. But each one of the books in this series follows one of those 3 guys, and like those are the kind of like names that they're given to themselves. But what I loved about this novella, which was, you know, when it comes to her writing, is that obviously there's novellas, so you kind of expect the story to happen quicker than you would with a full-length novel, but she made it make sense to where it didn't feel like it lacked in any kind of character development, plot development. The romance felt realistic as far as the timeline, because again, it's very easy to make a novella feel very, very rushed, and she didn't do that. They were shorter stories, yes, but she made it make sense, and it didn't feel rushed, and it felt like the appropriate amount of time, and it felt like she gave the amount of time that she needed to all of these different aspects to make this series so good. So I fell head over heels. I read all 3 back to back to back because I loved them so much. I don't know why. I just randomly, well, it was for, I feel like I did like the romance readathon, I feel like earlier last year. And so because of that, I started trying out all these random things, and this is one that I feel like people are sleeping on. And so this author has done a few other things. I feel like she's really, I'm not sure she's written any novels, but I might be wrong about that. But she has written quite a few novellas, and I'm very interested in other things by her because it's like the fact that she can just give everything you'd want from a full-length novel in such a short amount of time is amazing to me. So I love it. I love that she was able to do that, and I love her now. So yeah, she's definitely one that I discovered last year. Another one that I discovered last year is McKenzie, who wrote A Daughter of the Trolls. This is her debut novel, so obviously like I couldn't have quite discovered her until last year, but this is a YA fantasy, and again, she was able to pair so many amazing things together and make me care. There's disability rep within this book. You've got a fantastical adventure. It's based in mythology as well, but you don't miss anything if you don't understand that mythology. It's so well researched. It's so well fleshed out. All the characters feel realistic, and like, I read this book physically. I don't know if I can express to you guys how much I don't read physically. I do a lot of my reading in a mixed form or audiobook. Audiobook is involved somehow unless it's like a manga or graphic novel. I very rarely read physically because it takes me forever to do so. And I read this book in a little less than a week, I think. And that is saying something. She just has such an amazing writing style, and I don't know how to express to you how amazing she is, but I will continue to read things that she puts out because I think she's incredible. And I think whether, like, this is at a time when I was debating on what kind of YA I wanted to read and what kind of trying to figure out what that line was. And she surpassed it all. I didn't question once if I was going to like this book once I started, because the story took me heart and soul, and I think she's amazing. I think she's amazing. That's the theme within this video, is I think she's amazing. So, and also she's like an indie published book, so, or an indie published author. And so I really want to help support her as much as I can because she's just so good, and she deserves all of it. And the last author that's on my list today is Sonali, who wrote the Rajay's series, which is Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors, Recipe for Persuasion, Incense and Sensibility, and the Emma Project. So this is just one series by her. There's another series by her that's called, I can't remember what it's called, but it has to do with Bollywood. And I may or may not already have all of the audiobooks for that because I think it's going to be so good. But she's an author that, I don't know if you guys, I've talked about it a lot here recently when I did a lot of my end of the year content, so maybe you remember, but I was able to read these 3 books in the course of one weekend. I was really bad last year at letting the mood take me, so like I read the first one because it was on a TBR of mine, and then I saw the second one, I had the audiobook from my library, and I was like, well, I'll just try it, you know, like, why not? I mean, it's not going to hurt anything if I squeeze one more in there. And then I went out and bought the third one, and then the fourth one didn't come out until later that year. But I became obsessed with her writing. This series specifically is inspired by Jane Austen. So each book in the series follows someone that's in or connected to, the Rajay family, which is this very prominent Indian American family. And then each book, as you can probably tell by the cover and the title, are all semi-loosely based on a specific book. So we've got Pride and Prejudice, Persuasion, Sense and Sensibility, and then Emma. So each book kind of is very, very loosely based, like takes the plot somewhat of the respective Jane Austen book and kind of creates a new world for it. And what I loved about these stories is, yes, you have that awesome Jane Austen vibe if you're a fan of Jane Austen, but each of these tackles deep, important conversations. So I would look up trigger warnings for all of these, especially the second one. I think is the one that has the biggest ones in my opinion, because each of them deals with something so big, sometimes, and a lot of them have to deal with some sort of like social conversation as well. So they pack a punch with them, and yet they don't lose their fun rom-com vibe as well. So I just loved them. I loved everything about these books, and I've become obsessed with this author, and now I just want to read all the things by her because of this series specifically, which unfortunately has come to a close. So now I just need to find something else to be obsessed with for her. But yeah, I read an entire series in a year, which is honestly saying something. Like, I do not do that. So that's it. That is a look at all of the authors, well, some of my favorite authors that I have discovered as of last year, stumbled across last year at some point. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you've read any of the authors or anything from the authors that I've mentioned in today's video, please let me know some of your favorites. Like I said, a lot of these, I'm just barely scratching the surface. So if you've got some good recommendations, please let me know. Or if there's an author that you stumbled across last year that you just fell head over heels in love with and you'd like to share, I would love to know what some of your favorites are. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!